Hi, welcome to the Bible Standard, where you are guaranteed in-depth Bible study and analysis. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and drop a comment in the comments area to have your say, and we'll do our best to reply.
The butterfly is a strange creature because it goes through a series of transitions. It starts off as a very humble grub, or caterpillar as we commonly know it. In fact, it actually goes through 4 phases from birth to death. It starts off in the first place, like all other insects, as an egg. So that's stage 1, the egg. The butterfly needs the right kind of leaf to lay her eggs on. And she's quite fussy about this, because if she lays the eggs on the wrong kind of plant, the caterpillars will die. So she has sharp claws, and she stamps on a prospective leaf until it releases a smell, the right kind of smell. And if she recognises that smell as being good for her babies, she will deposit her egg, or perhaps even a group of eggs, on that particular leaf. Here's a picture, for example, of the butterfly's claws. They're quite sharp, and that's what she dances on the leaf to release the smell of the leaf. Well, here's a picture of some butterfly eggs. Sometimes it's one egg, and sometimes it's a whole group of eggs, as you can see in these 3 pictures. So here's a butterfly, a female butterfly, busy laying her eggs on a garden plant. There's a cluster of eggs on the underside of the leaf where they will be out of sight of birds, which otherwise might gobble up the eggs, and that will be the end of those butterflies. So then the eggs eventually hatch out, and we move on to stage 2 of the process, that is the caterpillar. So those eggs hatch out as very small caterpillars, but they very quickly grow. Here's a classic picture of the underside of a cabbage leaf. Still a few eggs left on the bottom left-hand corner, but look at the right-hand corner, top right-hand, where they're already munching their way through the green vegetable leaf. Very annoying for the gardener. Well, of course, as they feed, they get bigger. And so the caterpillars have to split their skins in order to allow them to become fatter. Here's some pictures of how quickly they grow. And again, you probably recognise these if you're a gardener and you've left your cabbages unprotected from butterflies. So these caterpillars have to molt. And that is, they split their skin and they merge from the skin into a bigger one as they grow. You see the old skin hanging up on the plant material above, and the new caterpillar with its much bigger skin busy growing down below. Now, it's a fact, of course, that birds love to eat caterpillars. So some caterpillars actually use camouflage to hide themselves so the birds won't eat them. This particular caterpillar is the same colour as the leaf it eats. So the bird might easily fly across there and not even notice there is a caterpillar sitting there. But this one's even more complicated. It actually imitates the branch on which it rests while it's feeding. And, at a quick glance, you wouldn't believe that was a caterpillar, would you? And what about this one? Have a look very carefully at this leaf. I bet you can't even see the caterpillar, but I'm going to enlarge it a little bit there, and maybe you can just about see how it's merged so perfectly into the background of the leaf that you have to look really hard to see it. So yes, that's not going to get eaten by a bird. However, this particular caterpillar is very brightly coloured. And that's the opposite, really. That's to alert the birds that might fly over that this particular caterpillar is going to be very bad to eat. It'll give you tummy ache. So that's why it is quite brightly coloured. Well, eventually our caterpillar gets bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually it comes to stage 3 of its life cycle. That is when it moves into a chrysalis. So the caterpillar stage can last for several weeks. In some cases, it can last for years. It's an interesting case. The cicada will stay underground feeding on the sap of the roots of trees for 17 years before it eventually turns into the second stage, the third stage of the process, where it becomes a chrysalis. Okay, so when the time comes to make a chrysalis, our caterpillar will attach itself to a safe place, upside down from a leaf, or even inside a shed or somewhere like that, and it will change shape. It stretches and it spins round itself with its jaws a cocoon of silk, which very slowly hardens into quite a strong shell. And then this chrysalis becomes quite still, won't move, and maybe for many months through the winter, perhaps, until the weather becomes suitable for hatching out into a butterfly. So here's an interesting picture, artificial picture really, where they've stapled to the branch the succession from left to right of how it makes its chrysalis. You can see it's moving its head round and round itself in a circle to spin the silk and to make the chrysalis, which then hardens into quite a strong, solid structure. Now, what's actually happening inside that chrysalis? This is fascinating. Inside the chrysalis, the little caterpillar turns into a butterfly. What happens is the body of the caterpillar becomes completely digested into a kind of soup, a soup of cells, which have to reorganise themselves. And the key stem cell groups will guide the reassembly of that kind of porridge into new butterfly wings, butterfly legs, butterfly eyes, butterfly antennae. Quite different altogether to what the caterpillar was. The blood system, the brain, the breathing tubes, which the caterpillar breathed with out of its side, they're completely changed during this process. Here's some interesting imaging pictures of the changes inside the chrysalis from day 1 through to day 13 there at the bottom in 2 dimensions, from above and from the side. So it completely changed. That brings us to stage 4, the butterfly itself. When the conditions are right, on perhaps a warm spring day, you'll see the casing, the chrysalis, begin to move, and the butterfly will eat through one end of its chrysalis and emerge from the tube into the open air. It will crawl out, and it will pump fluid into the veins of its wings until they extend out like little sails above its body. And when that's hardened sufficiently, it will flex those wings and fly away. And that whole process from chrysalis to caterpillar to butterfly, we call metamorphosis, which literally means a change of form, a change of shape, completely different. So this picture shows you, again, artificially clipped to the woodwork, but from the left to the right, you can see the butterfly emerging from its chrysalis and the wings spreading out like little sails and beginning to harden so that eventually it can fly away into the blue sky. So there's a summary, a life cycle. We start off with the egg, number 1 on the right. We move around to the caterpillar or larva, around again to the chrysalis, move around again to the butterfly, number 4 at the top. Now, some interesting facts. What about the diet of the butterfly? When it's a caterpillar, it lives on green leaves. But when it's a butterfly, it sips nectar from flowers, a completely different diet. That's fascinating. The caterpillar has very heavy jaws in order to chew through the leaves it needs to live on. But the butterfly, when it hatches out, has a long coiled sucking tube called the proboscis to remove nectar from the inside of the flower. So here's the caterpillar. On the top left-hand side, you can just about see the top of its head there, and it's busy munching away with its strong jaws into the texture of that green leaf. But now the same caterpillar, when it becomes a butterfly, has no jaws like that at all. Completely different. Has this long sucking tube coiled up underneath its chin. Now there's a close-up picture, beautiful close-up picture of the proboscis curled up, ready for extension to suck out of the inside of a flower. Oh, you notice from that picture too that the butterfly's eyes are now quite different. A butterfly has thousands of tiny fixed eyes that gives it an all-round view of the world around its head. Another point too, the butterfly can actually see ultraviolet light, which we can't see with our human eyes. So there's a picture of the compound eye. And if I magnify that again, you can see the thousands of tiny facets pointing in all different directions. And because there's an eye on both sides of the head, you can see an all-round view of the world focused onto its little brain. Well, like the caterpillar, some butterflies use camouflage to avoid being eaten by predators. Some of them have markings like eyes to frighten birds away. Some have very strong colours when they're flying, but when they settle onto their normal habitat to rest, they become almost invisible. And others even resemble leaves on which they feed, or on which they fed, so that they can become invisible on the leaf. Some of them are poisonous to birds, and those are the ones that carry a bright warning in very bright colours to keep the birds off and so that avoid them being eaten. Here, for example, from our own gardens, in British gardens, is a peacock butterfly, but the wings, like the tail of a peacock, seem to have eyes on them. And you imagine a bird flying up and seeing those great big eyes staring at it, will think, well, that looks dangerous, and it will go away. Here's another one. It actually has, it's a butterfly you're looking at, and it has eyes which look like the eyes of an owl, the same colour as the owl. That's amazing, isn't it? Here's a close-up of one of these so-called eyes built into the wing of a butterfly. Here's a butterfly that imitates a leaf, so that when it settles on that branch, it's not going to be eaten by birds while it's resting, because it looks just like a leaf. Here's another one settled on the trunk of a tree with almost perfect camouflage. At a quick glance, you could walk straight past that, and you wouldn't even know it was there. Now, these wings of butterflies are absolutely fascinating. It's quite amazing, isn't it, that the caterpillar, which walks on legs, can turn into a beautiful creature that can fly through the air. The fact is, those butterfly wings are covered with thousands of tiny scales, just like the tiles on the roof of a house. And the colours of those scales change across the wing to form the pattern, for example, the eye that we saw on the peacock. So here's a close-up of the scales. And you can see how some of the scales are coloured quite differently to the ones next to them, in order to build up this picture that we want to see. Look at this one here. Here we have one of those, quote, eyes, unquote. It's being formed in the scales on the wing of the butterfly. And there's different colours quite close to each other, changing from one to another to create the background picture of an eye. Here's a close-up of some of those scales. And you can see them when they're under the microscope, they're really beautiful. Here's a really close-up micrometer photograph of some of those tiny scales. Now, sometimes the colours on those scales are just created by pigments, like painting on with a brush. So, say, for example, the British brimstone butterfly, it's bright yellow in colour, and that's the outside of the scales is actually coloured bright yellow. Here's the British common blue butterfly, which sits around our gardens at this time of the year. But here's some amazing patterns on this particular butterfly's wings. I think it looks like a nettle above it, doesn't it? A singing nettle leaf above. But look at the patterns on those leaves, built up as the colours change across the scales. Now, some of those colours, yes, are like a direct application of colour onto the outside of the scale. But some colours on butterfly wings are made by rows of triangular ridges on the scales, which act as prisms. You remember that from physics. A prism will actually take light coming in and bend the light, so it goes out at a different speed to what it came in. And those prisms on the butterfly's wings refract the light coming in at an angle, and they change the wavelengths of the light as it leaves the prism. So we get iridescent colours when the scale surface has several different layers like that, and the light passing through each layer in turn can change as it comes out with the viewing angle from which you're looking at it. So it creates a kind of shimmering effect, which is very beautiful. Here's some of those ridges on the wing scales of the butterfly. And here's one scale, one particular iridescent scale for you to look at. So that's the kind of thing you get. This amazing iridescence that changes colour as the angles, as the butterfly flies, and the angles at which the light strikes its wings and come back into your eyes change, and it gives this iridescent effect. Here's another picture of a tropical butterfly. Wow, wouldn't it be great if we could see some of those in our British gardens? Well, it's time now then, as we always do, to ask some questions. What are the implications of what we've been looking at? Ask yourself, how could the change from caterpillar to butterfly come about? They're like two completely different animals, aren't they, in one? It's very hard to explain by evolution how the caterpillar could suddenly decide to become a butterfly. How could just trial and error turn a grub with jaws into a flying insect with this proboscis, a tube for sucking nectar? It's very hard to think how that could possibly come about just by a series of chance mutations, isn't it? How did the wings originate from a caterpillar that never ever wants to get into the sky, you wouldn't think, but it does? What about the completely different digestive system? The caterpillar lives on the green leaf, but the butterfly sucks nectar from a flower. How did those markings appear on the butterfly wings, the eyes, or the appearance of the bark of a tree? That's very detailed genetic control of the colours of those scales on the wings of the butterfly. It's interesting, actually, looking at that particular point, that in experiments they've taken male butterflies of a particular species and they've painted them artificially in other colours. But the fact is the female butterflies of that species still treat them as if they're normal, which rather indicates that the colours on the butterfly's wings are not there to attract females. They don't seem to be disturbed by a completely different artificial colour. So why do butterflies have such beautiful wings as those we saw in our photographs? And of course, we who read the Bible and believe in the Bible are told that the butterfly, or the caterpillar and the butterfly, are all part of that great pyramid of life that God created in the beginning. The caterpillar provides food for many birds. The butterfly pollinates flowers. Two valuable uses of those two halves of its life. But the beauty of the butterfly's wings surely has to be just for the pleasure of human beings like us, and more importantly, of God himself who created it. And that's what the Bible says. Here's a verse in Genesis chapter 1. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things. Livestock and creeping things. That's a caterpillar, isn't it? He's a creeping thing. And beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. So says the story of the creation in Genesis chapter 1. But what about this one? This is in the book of Revelation. Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honour and power, for thou hast created all things, and here it is, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. So God himself finds pleasure in these beautiful things he's made, just as we do. And that, my friends, is the end of today's story, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to that.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought, and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and remember to come back soon.